once have distinguished them, independently of anything else, from the quiet, hard-worked, red-shirted merchant seaman. "That chap is not much to be trusted," said the lieutenant. "His bunting would make a few jackets for Joseph, I take it." But we had little time to be critical before our friend Peter came paddling back with another blackamoor in the stern, of as ungainly an exterior as could well be imagined. He was a very large man, whose weight every now and then, as they breasted the short sea, cocked up the snout of the canoe with Peter Mangrove in it, as if he had been a cork, leaving him to flourish his paddle in the air, like the weather wheel of a steamboat in a seaway. The newcomer was strong and broad-shouldered, with long muscular arms and a chest like Hercules, but his legs and thighs were, for his bulk, remarkably puny and misshapen. A thick fell of black wool, in close tufts, as if his face had been stuck full of cloves, covered his chin and upper lip, and his hair, if hair it could be called, was twisted into 100 short plaits that bristled out and gave his head, when he took his hat off, the appearance of a porcupine. There was a large sabre cut across his nose and down his cheek, and he wore 2 immense gold earrings. His dress consisted of short cotton drawers that did not reach within 2 inches of his knee, leaving his thin cucumber shanks, on which the small bullet-like calf appeared to have been stuck before, through mistake, in place of a baft, naked to the shoe, a check shirt, and an enormously large Panama hat, made of a sort of cane, split small and worn shovel fashion. Notwithstanding, he made his bow by no means ungracefully, and offered his services in choice Spanish, but spoke English as soon as he heard who we were. "Pray, sir, are you the master of that vessel?" said the lieutenant. "No, sir, I am the mate, and I learn you are desirous of a passage to Jamaica." This was spoken in a broad Scotch accent. "Yes, we are," said I, in very great astonishment, "but we will not sail with the devil, and whoever saw a negro Scotchman before, the spirit of Nicol Jarvie, conjured into a blackamoor's skin?" The fellow laughed. "I am black, as you see. So were my father and mother before me," and he looked at me, as much as to say, "I have read the book you quote from. But I was born in the good town of Port Glasgow notwithstanding, and many a voyage I have made as the cabin boy and cook in the good ship the Peggy Bogle, with worthy old Jock Hunter. But that matters not. I was told you wanted to go to Jamaica. I dare say our captain will take you for a moderate passage money. But here he comes to speak for himself. Captain Van der Bosch. Here are 2 shipwrecked British officers, who wish to be put on shore on the east end of Jamaica. Will you take them, and what will you charge for their passage?" The man he spoke to was nearly as tall as himself. He was a sunburnt, angular, raw-boned, iron-visaged veteran, with a nose in shape and colour like the bowl of his own pipe, but not at all, according to the received idea, like a Dutchman. His dress was quizzical enough: white trousers, a long flapped embroidered waistcoat that might have belonged to a Spanish grandee, with an old-fashioned French-cut coat, showing the frayed marks where the lace had been stripped off, voluminous in the skirts, but very tight in the sleeves, which were so short as to leave his large bony paws and 6 inches of his arm above the wrist exposed. Altogether it fitted him like a purser's shirt on a handspike. "Why, for 100 thaler I will land them safe in Mackinaw Bay. But how shall we manage, Williamson? The cabin was pint yesterday." The Scotch negro nodded. "Never mind. I dare say the smell of the paint won't signify to the gentleman." The bargain was ratified. We agreed to pay the stipulated sum, and that same evening, having dropped down with the last of the sea breeze, we set sail from Boca Chica, and began working up under the lee of the headland of Punta Canoa. When off the San Domingo gate, we burned a blue light, which was immediately answered by another inshore of us. In the glare we could perceive 2 boats full of men. Anyone who has ever played at snapdragon can imagine the unearthly appearance of objects when seen by this species of firework. In the present instance it was held aloft on a boat hook, and cast a strong spectral light on the band of lawless ruffians, who were so crowded together that they entirely filled the boats, no part of which could be seen. It seemed as if 2 clusters of fiends, suddenly vomited forth from hell, were floating on the surface of the midnight sea, in the midst of brimstone flames. In a few moments our crew was strengthened by about 40 as ugly Christians as I ever set eyes on. They were of all ages, countries, complexions, and tongues, and looked as if they had been kidnapped by a press gang as they had knocked off from the Tower of Babel. From the moment they came on board, Captain Vanderbosch was shorn of all his glory, and sank into the petty officer, while, to our amazement, the Scottish negro took the command, evincing great coolness, energy, and skill. He ordered the schooner to be wore as soon as we had shipped the men, and laid her head off the land, then set all hands to shift the old suit of sails, and to bend new ones. "Why did you not shift your canvas before we started?" said I to the Dutch captain, or mate, or whatever he might be. "Why won't you be content to take a quiet passage, and hax no question?" was the uncivil rejoinder, which I felt inclined to resent, until I remembered that we were in the hands of the Philistines, where a quarrel would have been worse than useless. I was gulping down the insult as well as I could, when the black captain came aft, and, with the air of an equal, invited us into the cabin to take a glass of grog. We had scarcely sat down before we heard a noise like the swaying up of guns, or some other heavy articles, from the hold. I caught Mr. Splinter's eye. He nodded, but said nothing. In half an hour afterwards, when we went on deck, we saw by the light of the moon 12 18-pound carronades mounted, 6 of a side, with their accompaniments of rammers and sponges, water buckets, boxes of round grape, and canister, and tubs of wadding, while the coamings of the hatchways were thickly studded with round shot. The tarpaulin and lumber forward had disappeared, and there lay Long Tom, ready levelled, grinning on his pivot. The ropes were all coiled away, and laid down in regular man-o'-war fashion, while an ugly gruff beast of a Spanish mulatto, apparently the officer of the watch, walked the weather side of the quarter-deck in true pendulum style. Lookouts were placed aft, and at the gangways and bows, who every now and then passed the word to keep the bright lookout, while the rest of the watch were stretched silent, but evidently broad awake, under the lee of the boat. We noticed that each man had his cutlass buckled round his waist, that the boarding pikes had been cut loose from the main boom, round which they had been stopped, and that about 30 muskets were ranged along a fixed rack that ran athwartships near the main hatchway. By the time we had reconnoitred thus far, the night became overcast, and a thick bank of clouds began to rise to windward. Some heavy drops of rain fell, and the thunder grumbled at a distance. The veil crept gradually on, until it shrouded the whole firmament, and left us in as dark a night as ever poor devils were out in. By and by a narrow